So I think play is the idea of hopeful, boundary breaking, rule ignoring progress. And
Mm-hmm.
that can be in technology, that can be in medicine, or that can be in society. Well, this is a community that no one dares go near. We went into the middle of it playing trumpets and said, come out and watch a show. They did, and it was beautiful. That's the
Wow.
power of play. It was, I wanted nothing from them. I wasn't trying to teach them. I had no agenda. And I think that's what play especially for children, but also the parents that watch them. That's what play does. It's the great leveler. And you can't laugh if you're feeling super duper tense, not real laughter. So if I can make them laugh, it means in that second at least they're relaxed. In that
Mm-hmm.
moment, I've gone through the trauma and made them giggle because I kicked my other clown in the butt and then he turned around and whacked me with a frying pan or whatever.
Right.
It's the human element, isn't it?
Do you remember what it feels like to be comfortable in your own skin? Not just confident, but also pain-free, relaxed, healthy, and carefree. Think about the most robust version of your own childhood body. This is what Lifeyness feels like, a joyful spirit and a vibrant physical state of being. I'm your guide, Professor Sarah, storyteller, teacher, and wellness enthusiast. Reach into the vitality of your own girlhood to supercharge your grown-up life. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Lifeyness. This is going to be just a little bit different, but the same message as always. If you've never heard of the Flying Seagull Project or Ash Perrin, you're in for a treat. The Flying Seagull Project is a traveling troupe of clowns and entertainers who bring joy and play to kids and families in places you'd normally associate with violence and poverty. Mostly refugee camps across Europe, orphanages in the UK, now in Poland as well, where thousands of Ukrainian refugees have fled to. So today I'm speaking with their fearless leader, Ash Perrin. And Ash says that play is not a luxury for some. It's a right, especially for children, to be able to grow and develop properly. So his group helps families who may be completely preoccupied with just putting a roof over their children's heads or fleeing violent areas. He helps them have a bit of fun, just for a few moments of respite. The Flying Seagull Project has grown by leaps and bounds in the last few years and is now recognized by huge organizations such as Save the Children. But it began about 15 years ago with just a van and a small group of volunteers, as Ash is going to tell us. And I met him 5 years ago when I was working with TEDxJacksonville here in downtown Jacksonville. And he did one of our most brilliant talks. It was called The Power of Play. So, of course, it makes a lot of sense to have him on the show. Ash is going to talk to us a lot about the power of play in human development. He's going to talk about how play is sacred and we all need to create a space for it, especially for our children. I love how he says, if children are going to be able to imagine what they're going to be when they grow up, what they are going to study, they have to have playful thoughts in their minds. They have to have that flexibility of imagination and a light touch in order to kind of choose the right calling and choose the right line of work. So it is essential to be a playful person. And, that's just for kids. Obviously, like on this show, we talk a lot about how play is important for adult women. So we're going to talk about parents. We're going to talk about just in the workplace, how professionally fun and play is important. Bodies and minds that heal good, feel good. That's what Ash says. And there is a lot of evidence now to show that children in hospitals, they heal faster if they are visited by a clown or an entertainer or they have some play and laughter in their healing environment. So Ash will talk a little bit about that. And Ash has some tips for parents on how to cultivate a more sacred space for play, and how simple it can be for parents to do that for their kids, but also how to cultivate playfulness in your own life, whether at work or at home. And then we also kind of acknowledge the difficulty of, having a serious adult life where you're supposed to be productive, and then you're also supposed to be supporting others, and you're supposed to be a serious parent, and how it's hard to work in playfulness in that. So please welcome Ash Perrin to the show.
Is that better? Yes.
Yeah.
Little better there.
Perfect.
I'm in my truck, so I live in an old show truck when I'm on the festival season. So I'm in my.
I love that.
Show
That's what I imagine you living in, an old show truck. So
well, in an old show truck in a big open space with antiques everywhere. So it's exactly, hopefully, as you'd have guessed.
But yeah, so thank you so much. My podcast is mainly geared towards, women, or I've had exclusively all women. So you have the distinction of being the first male guest.
Well, I feel very male and proud, if I'm allowed to say those sentences.
So it's so nice to see you. And it was so lovely to watch your talk again. And as far as like what I'm doing right now, it just dovetails so nicely. So I'm so happy that we can talk. And I really want to catch up and kind of like see how things are going with the project and where you are. I don't even know where you are right now.
Now I'm in the UK. So we do a fundraising roadshow across all the main music events. So Glastonbury and all the big festivals, they have kids areas.
Okay.
We set up a stage, we do advocacy and show, like mainly shows, but then I use the opportunity to say to the audience, hey, how your kids are having fun? Don't you reckon all kids should have fun? I do. Do you want to help us? So it's lovely. So we're mid-season. Hence why I'm a little bit all over the place, because we had a six-day working week last week at a very stormy event. It was great, and then we're leaving tomorrow morning for the next one. So
lovely.
Yes, UK.
Yeah.
But, it's funny, the talk, when I did the talk, it was like right in the middle of an extremely, again, always a hectic season of camp work. And no one here ever really mentioned it, like it went out, some people saw it. But recently, the last 6 months, the amount of people who say, I watched your TED talk, or we showed your TED talk in school, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow, like it's years later, and it's kind of now seeming to gather a bit of momentum.
Yeah. Well, it's a timeless talk, but I'm sure it will continue to gain traction. So I want to kind of go back. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And I want to go back for listeners who don't know who you are and don't know about the Flying Seagull Project, and just talk about when you kind of first discovered this power of play. This was your mission. This was what you needed to do, is bring play into the lives of, people who had been devastated by, other things, and they needed this for their souls.
Yeah. Well, even the very conception of it. So I worked as a professional clown when I left acting. In fact, throughout my drama schools, I went to theatre school. It was never really my bag. And to be honest, I actually turned down the place. I phoned them and said I wouldn't be coming, because I just thought it's not really my deal. And then they offered me a full scholarship. So I was like, well, I'm from a fairly humble background. So the idea of a scholarship of £30,000, you're like, okay, don't be so smug, just say yes.
Yeah.
But we had no money. So I started doing clowning through drama school. And then when I left, I went into some fairly well-paid kind of corporate clown work. And then I'd travel, then I'd do work, and then I'd travel. And obviously, bit by bit, you start to travel a bit more off, left field. And I was in Cambodia, and I went to an orphanage. To be totally honest, I didn't go through a philanthropic desire. I went because it's what you do when you're in Cambodia. You see certain things, and one is volunteer in an orphanage. And I thought, well, I've always got my magic kit with me. I always carry a few magic tricks so that when kids beg on the street, I don't just say no. I want to offer them something, but I don't want to give them money, because the money means they stay on the streets. So anyway, I went to this orphanage, and we went on this trip to a lake. I did a magic show. And then when we got back, I was just playing guitar. Very, very average, 3 chords. I'm not much of a guitar player. And the impact on the kids, that they just gathered like moths to a light. And I'm not being humble. I'm not much of a guitar player. I'm okay. And these kids were just gathering in and gravitating and just sitting there, and because I was playing for them, it had an even stronger
Yeah.
feeling. Ended up with I had every kid in the orphanage, like 60 kids all gathered round, and again. So I played these songs, and then when I left the next day, I was in a car with my sister. We were traveling together, and I just started thinking about these kids, and there was a few details that caught in my brain, and one of them was that their toothbrushes had numbers on, not names. They had a numbered toothbrush. And I just thought how impersonal that was, and how kind of turning these life forms into a unit, a measurement for feeding, watering, and teeth brushing. It was just very perfunctory. And I thought, but these are human souls. Like, I had a pink toothbrush because it was funny, because it was a joke my mum played on me. Like, these little details of where humanity exists when you're growing up weren't
Yeah.
there. And then
Yeah.
I thought a bit longer, which was about I was there for 3 days at the orphanage, and there were kids from 1 year old, maybe up to 16, let's say. And none of them cried at any point in 3 days. None of them shed a tear. And one of them even electrocuted himself whilst I was there, messing around with a plug. Didn't cry. And it's just a detail.
Aw.
I thought, why didn't they cry? And then I realized it's, you cry because it evokes a care response from whoever it is that looks after you, parent, if you're lucky enough, someone else, if not. And I thought, if no one cares for you, there's no point in crying, because there's no one's going to hug you if you do. And that
Oh,
thought of no one will hug you if you cry, like, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I had a big old mum who did big old hugs when I needed them.
yeah.
And I thought, like, that detail of it's no one to love you, no one to hug you, no one to ask you about your nightmares if you wake up upset, or to encourage you if you're excited about something. And those little human details, I just thought, no, like that. And I started weeping in the car. I was thinking about all the kids in Cambodia, and then all the kids in all the places I've been, and then all the kids worldwide, and then all the people worldwide who are lonely. And I just thought, like, I felt like a billionaire who'd never noticed how poor everybody else was. But I don't mean in terms of money, I meant in terms of love and support.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, I can't do much. I'm not a builder, I'm not a doctor, but I've never met a kid I couldn't make laugh. I've never met an audience I couldn't get giggling. And I thought, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll just do that. So I flew home the next day, sold everything I owned, quit my acting agency, bought a van, and drove to Romania 3 months later. And that was how it all started. So
Wow.
even the very conception of it was, I will not accept a world where certain people in certain body types, or certain faiths, or certain social demographics do or don't get a happy childhood, or do or don't get to taste the magic that life has to offer in the good moments. That didn't seem right.
Yeah.
And then we started in Romania, and that was where it all began 15 years ago this September.
Mm.
So
Wow.
yeah, that moment was, and then the power of it, like, from these kids in the orphanage. And then the first time we went to Romania, the first 2 days, I was in an orphanage, and then someone said there's a Roma community nearby, which are, what, politically incorrect if gypsy, but Roma community is the right one, which is people from a Roma background who, left India 1,000 years ago, are stateless, living on the edges of society. And someone said, "Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Well, why wouldn't I?" And they said, "Well, it's a bit dangerous, and they can be a bit blah, blah, blah." And I thought, well, I'll take nothing of value with me, and then they can take nothing of value. So we
Hmm.
went, and it was amazing. Like, the entire village came, every kid, every adult. And because I looked at them without a judgment, I looked at them as an audience. I hope they like this, or they don't like that, or they enjoy slapstick. Oh, the magic's getting them. Forget the juggling, we'll do a balance act. And that's the job of the showman, is you call what the audience wants. So I gave them status above me. I gave them audience status, and it was my job to please them. And whenever I did that in any Roma community, and I've met them all in Romania now, they greet it with the exact same judgmentless respect. And they laughed, and they cheered, and they clapped the shows, and they, no good, no good, like joined in all the
Oh.
actions. So this is a community that no one dares go near. We went into the middle of it playing trumpets and said, "Come out and watch a show." They did, and it was beautiful. And I went
Oh.
back every
Wow.
year for 6 years, and I met
Mhm.
them like friends from then on. That's
Wow.
the power of play. It was, I wanted nothing from them. I wasn't trying to teach them. I had no agenda. I
Yeah.
hoped I could make them laugh. I tried really hard to do that, and
Yeah.
they did laugh, and they grateful for that offer. And I think that was when I realized there's a purity to it. And if
Yeah.
you add in status, add in nationality, you lose the purity. So it has to be pure, based on audience, joker, can I find their key?
Hmm.
And we
Yeah.
always have.
Yeah. Can I connect? Wow, that's amazing. Both of those moments in Cambodia and in Romania. Like, those are some people don't get that, you know, where you have like that moment where you're like, I know what I'm going to do. Like that's very dramatic that you flew home and you sold everything and you just knew. Like it's such a gift that you had that powerful
Mm.
message.
It was mind blowing, and I'm not putting myself down or trying to play kind of caricature, but like before then, I guess I would have probably said I leant towards hedonism. My work
Yeah.
was kids' parties and clowning events. I liked them. I put a bit of energy in, but it wasn't heart and soul.
Right.
And when I realized what I wanted to do, and it was a real like epiphanal,
Yeah.
not I want to do it, I am going to do it. I wrote myself a letter, and it was a really simple letter. It said, "Dear Ash, this is Ash. When you get back, you might be tempted into going out drinking or partying. Never forget, there is nothing more heartbreaking than loneliness in the smile of a child. Never forget, get on with it." And it was that, like, to look at a kid smiling and see them lonely.
Yeah.
That
Hmm.
is that is a world that's failed them. I get choked up
Yeah. Of course.
because they shouldn't have that when they're 5. They're
Mhm.
angels on earth who haven't yet been dirtied by society. They're just little open-hearted baby angels who need to be treated delicate, and the
Yeah.
world is rough on them.
Yeah. It's hard to think about. You had a catchphrase in your talk, and I don't know if you still use this, but I love it. It's bodies and minds that feel good, heal good. That just sums up everything that I want to convey in this podcast. That if you feel good, then you can heal well. But I love that you say not just bodies, but bodies and minds.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, and I think finally medical science is catching up, and there's an awful lot, especially since COVID. Not many silver linings, but one of the silver linings I think post COVID is that the absolute lack of, complete void of interpersonal play between children because they weren't allowed to go to school.
Yeah.
I think that society has recognized what an incredibly negative impact and destructive impact that had on development, which has
Yeah.
been known by play practitioners forever, but it hasn't
Mhm.
entered into mainstream. So I feel like medical science is now recognizing that, the most common sort of medical treatment of anyone worldwide is placebo, sugar pills. Most
Mhm.
of us get given sugar pills when we go to, or an antibiotic that has been ineffective for a decade. We will get given it, but we go, the doctor saw me, I take this, now I feel better. It's all placebo. The problem with
Yeah.
that is the opposite side of placebo is nocebo. And nocebo is the opposite, where if you believe you're unwell, you become unwell. If you feel negative, you have health ailments or personality challenges or mental health challenges. Like, I'm not, trying to make light. Mental health challenges are real. They're not just in the mind or if you
Yeah.
feel blah, blah, blah. But there is an element of, yeah, bodies that feel better, heal better. And not just like physiologically in a
Yeah.
hospital. If a child is visited by a clown, their recovery time is less. That is a fact. That is not questioned. That is provable.
Right.
Now, I would also say, coming out of COVID, communities that have managed to stay connected and have community events and reach back in, we've got over that separation and some of the alienation that COVID made us all feel.
Yeah.
You scroll that out or roll that out across where we work with displaced communities. You talk about
Mhm.
refugee communities, let's say, that fled Afghanistan after the Taliban took over. They left everything. Okay, they left the physical stuff, houses and stuff, but they also left their neighborhood. They left their celebrations. They left
Mhm.
their Eid instead of Christmas. They left their friends and all the roots that give your soul strength, not
Right.
your body shelter, but your soul strength. And I don't think you get that back on your own, and you don't get that back if you're feeling hopeless.
Yeah.
You need to have hope. You need to believe that things, maybe they won't get better tomorrow, but they'll get better a bit tomorrow. You're
Mhm.
valuable enough to try tomorrow to feel better. And I think that's what play, especially for children, but also the parents that watch them. That's what play does. It's the great leveler. It's got to
Mm.
be pure. It's got to be energetic. And you can't laugh if you're feeling super duper tense, not real laughter. So if I can
Mhm.
make them laugh, it means in that second, at least they're relaxed. In that
Mhm.
moment, I've broken through the trauma and made them giggle because I kicked my other clown in the butt and then he turned around and whacked me with a frying pan or whatever. It's
Right.
it's the human element, isn't it?
So speaking of the parents and the grown-ups, what kind of advice do you give people in terms of like play and bringing play into your own life or bringing play into grown-ups' lives, not only in the camps that you work in, but just Like, what kind of advice would you give somebody in their everyday life? Like, how important is it to be playful? Because it's instinctive for children in a way. So how do you get it back in your life if you've lost it as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, I think because there's a thin line. I get asked this a lot about, about adults playing, and I've come up with a phrase, and I think I might even try and write a book about it one day if I can be bothered again. I wrote a book, and it was the only piece of homework I've ever completed, and it was painful. But it's the idea of playful thinking and thoughtful play.
Mm,
So actually, like I think grown-ups going into an office, it's a bit artificial, and I see it a lot. Not so much these days, but there was that moment where like I went for a meeting once for a promotional job, and we had a meeting in a ball pit in an office. I'm like, guys, you can't force it. Yeah, fill an office full of bright colored balls. Where am I supposed to sit? How am I supposed to write on a piece of paper? Like that's kind of forced. It's more that it's the light touch, like and I think people often mistake play as only ever linked to creative arts or
hmm
creative mediums, like if marketing or something where creativity plays a big role.
hmm
But if you think about the first person who imagined a laptop, there were computers, they were massive, then they were smaller, then they were on your desk. Somebody played with that idea. Somebody thought,
hmm
what if there could be a computer so small you could take it with your bag and do it in the park? Like that's a really playful thought. Or what
Yeah.
if type of mold found on a cheese could become a treatment such as penicillin? The people that
Mm,
discovered penicillin played and played and played, and they explored and they tried. And when failure happened, they didn't go, I failed. They said, oh, that didn't work. Let's try another combination. So I think play is the idea of hopeful, boundary breaking, rule ignoring progress. And
hmm
that can be in technology, that can be in medicine, or that can be in society. But yeah, for those people who are in an industry, linking it to professionalism, I think a playful approach means that you are able to hold on tightly and let go lightly. You hold on to an idea until you prove it wrong, then you let it go and try another one. And if
hmm
you're playful enough, you're not destroyed by the failure, you're encouraged by having to find another route, which is wonderful.
hmm
Um, to answer your question in terms of the other side around, especially parents, I guess this is aimed at, and a lot of your listeners, I guess, are parents, is play is sacred. And this is what I urge. In fact, I beg parents, play is sacred. It's not based on stuff. It's not based on tech. It's not based on what materials you can buy. You want the best play possible? Go in the garden. Don't take a chair. Don't let your kids be on the floor and you sit on a chair and say, what are we going to play now? What a boring question. Do not take your phone for 1 hour a week. Call it playtime. Make it as sacred as going to church on a Sunday or whatever it is you believe in. Put your phone aside, sit on the grass and go, what do you want me to do? And kids will do it. You've seen them, yourself. Like, right, I'll be an astronaut, and that's my spaceship, and you're going to be a zombie, but you're a zombie with ninja skills. Yeah, but I don't like ninjas. Can I be a bot? So it's like their imaginations are the boundless and limitless world of indigenous play. I said it in the talk, and play is indigenous language of the child.
hmm
It is a forced and needs to be learnt language of the adult. And I hear it so often these days where they say we need to teach kids to play. What utter nonsense that an adult would
Right.
have the arrogance or the ignorance to think
Right.
our categorized creative management of their time is play. Play is take nothing, take a cardboard box and a couple of sticks and a football and see what happens when they're in charge.
hmm
Because they know how to play. They know that play doesn't need anything. So I would say that like the most important thing is make space for it. Don't take your phone out, have it on the side in case you get that call. Put
hmm
that call below the value of connecting with your kids in play and just be free. Put
Yeah.
on a put on a set of old clothes and go into the woods and say, I'm a wizard. Who are you? Start with that.
Yeah.
Got to be it's got to be sacred because if they're going to imagine their future, if they're going to imagine who they could be in order to choose what they want to specialize in school, what they want to do in their senior year, what they might want to do when they leave, they can't imagine that if they don't have playful thoughts, willing enough to bend rules, reshape reality into something that their heart connects to.
Yeah. So it sounds like play is sacred and creating space for play is the most important thing. It's not, there's no instruction there. It's creating that space, which is what you do.
Yeah.
I think that's what that's what a game is. It's like you come in and you have some rules And within that space, within those rules, they can play. You're giving them that place.
I want to change the word rules to boundaries, because rules, I mean, the old edifice of rules are made to be broken. I am the biggest supporter of that. I think every rule that's ever been set should be taken out, kicked around, and see if it holds up. Whereas boundaries are a loving limit to maintain safety and to maintain healthy approach. So if you had a bunch of kids in the garden, let's say they'd all got a stick and they were playing zombies. If they are actually swinging that stick really, really hard, they could hit each other. And because they're just little uns, they don't know yet the difference between action, or the link between action and consequence. It's not neurologically there until you're about 17, 16. So I think boundaries are the single most loving thing you can do, because it means I'm saying, I care if you go too far. I care if you're in danger. Rules, on the opposite of that, are me saying, this is a control mechanism you have to just accept from me. So
Yeah.
I'd say all rules can be screwed up and chucked in the bin. All boundaries must be lovingly explained and insisted on. You know, my mum wouldn't let me out beyond a certain time. All my mates in my town went out late. My town's not very nice. I wanted desperately to go out late, but my mum said I had to be in by a certain time, and she was strict about it. But it's because she knew that after 10 o'clock at night, it's dangerous out in town, not just dangerous in terms of physically, but dangerous as in the sort of influences that the people that hang around at that point might have on me. So yeah, I would switch rules for boundaries, and then I'm totally in.
Yeah.
Set a few boundaries.
Yeah.
You know,
I love
couple of
that. And then you have that language of boundaries, you know, that language that we all need to set boundaries, you know, which is something I learned later in life, all about boundaries. So I like that a lot. Yeah, just having that word boundaries. And I was going to say earlier, you have such a good kind of a template for how to kind of create that space and create boundaries for kids, for parents. But I think it might be a good idea to do that for yourself. You know, if you're not a parent and you really need some play in your life, to put your phone aside and parent yourself and say, this is, you know, we're going to play, you know, like it might be in relation to a certain thing. Like, we're going to play with this idea at work today. We're going to play. I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to let myself write. I'm going to let myself paint. I'm going to let myself do whatever. And kind of parent yourself in that space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and even like, again, like we use the language of play. I think, again, I can't remember if I said this in a talk or not, but we use the language of play in business all the time. She's a big hitter and he's back in the game. You know, we use all these sporting terms. I mean, it's really important to draw a difference between sport and play. So sport is competitive and has a winner and a loser. Play, the experience is just what who plays, who wins, loses. It's kind of irrelevant. But, you know, we do use that language in play, in work, sorry. But it's also like, I think it comes down to quality of life. Most of us start our careers or go to work for either personal passion or to provide a home for our children. If you're lucky, it's both.
Yeah.
But it means that, like, so often I have a really dear friend of mine. His name's Ian. He's a really, really dear friend and a wonderful father and a wonderful guy. But before he had his first kid, they realized they were going to have a child. And he was working in it was a cool job. When he was not a father, he ran luxury. He was the researcher for a luxury travel company. So he would go on the journeys to see if they were good. Like, you couldn't get better than that. So he did the Trans-Mongolian Railway, full pay, staying in 5-star hotels, doing every attraction they offered to see if it was any good.
Wow.
But it took a lot of his hours. You know, he was away a lot. And then when his kid was coming, he said, I've quit my job. I'm like, what do you mean? He was like, I don't want to be the sort of dad who has a wonderful life but doesn't have enough time to share with his kids. So I'm starting my own company printing T-shirts. I'm like, okay. It's not a usual, you know, normally when people get pregnant, they double down on work. He did the opposite and said, I want out. I want to be available for my partner and available for my kids. Then he set up a T-shirt company and it did really well. So about 4 years ago, his kids now, I think he's got 3 now. So there's 4-year-old, 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, something like that. And his T-shirt company was doing really well. But then he was away from home loads in London working.
Right.
So he was like, same again. Well, didn't set this up to be away from my kids, didn't set this up to be a career dad. I want to be a dad, and my career has to fit around it. So he stepped back. Now he acts as a consultant for them. He's lucky. His partner is a scenic artist and she earns well. But it was just that continuing decision to make the space what he wanted. Okay, we've gone back into parents, but if you're not a parent, I'm not a parent. You still have to have the hours of the day where you feed your imagination, or you feed relaxation, or you feed fitness. You know, most of us, I'd love to go to the gym, but I run out of time. Make time then. Like, you're not going to die thinking, I wish I'd done more hours at work.
Right.
It doesn't happen. You won't die thinking, I wish I'd listened to my friends less and worked later at the office.
Yeah.
Everybody on their final moments thinks, why didn't I see my pals more, or spend time with my family, or hike the Himalayas like I always dreamed? Like, there's got to be that space, because life is experiential. It's not, you know, career matters, professional matters. You've got to earn some money in this age. But, you know, if you work with passion, I think finances often follow anyway. And then you have the joy of looking yourself in the mirror thinking, did my best, did it, gave it a pop.
Yeah. Yeah, that leads me to one of the things I wanted to ask you is, like, in this world that we live in, productivity is so important. And I hadn't even thought about the parent component, but it's like, yeah, it you know, I have 2 kids myself, and so it's that kind of ratchets it up a bit. It's like, not only do I need to produce income, but now I have to do this and that and the other thing, and juggle, and suddenly things get real serious real fast. And as you know, you were saying about, like, being a parent and creating the space for play, and it's like suddenly things are so serious, you feel like, you know, you can't, because you have to constantly produce, and you have to constantly say, okay, I have this amount of time. What did I do in that amount of time? And how do you switch your mindset to say, it's not about production, it's about, you know, feeding my soul?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and it's I think that there's two answers to it, or two elements. I've thought about this a lot, especially the last couple of years, because the Seagull Project grew from me in a van and a gang to 3 international offices, about to launch the 4th. You know, not a huge infrastructure. You know, what happens when hippies get organized? You know, we've got a fleet of 12 vehicles, we've got 3 offices, 3 warehouses, blah 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 blah. And so, you know, I think the important thing, and I realized it, is that ambition and greed share a few characteristics. And one of the characteristics that ambition and greed share is that it's never enough. If you'd have told me 10 years ago, sat me down and gone, Ash, in 10 years' time, you're going to have 3 international branches. Last year, in the year 2013, you're going to deliver 796 play sessions worldwide, meeting 28,000 children. I'd go, whoa. And he'd go, would you be happy with that? I'd say I would be man alive. I would be over the moon. That is what happened. And yet the temptation is to sit here and think, yeah, but I could have done more. And what about if we expand here? And there's this and there's that. So ambition is that thing of the point you're heading to is always elapsing you, or sorry, escaping you, because you always crave for more, rather than taking the small victories or even the big victories and saying that did well. And greed is the same. Greed is when there's never enough.
Yeah.
And there's a Buddhist saying, which is, the man whose well is full, so the man who fears a drought when his well is full will never be happy. Now, my well is full. So if I'm waking up fearing a drought, I am disregarding and deeply ungrateful for not only what I've achieved, but what my team have achieved with me, what the people who have supported us have helped happen, and what the kids have experienced. To say I should have done more undermines the 796 play sessions we did do.
Right.
So, yeah, greed and ambition. Forget ambition, forget greed. You do your best. Do your best. And your best means not the most. It means the best, which means you maintain healthy friendships. You maintain a good relationship with your family if you're lucky enough to still be in touch with them. You maintain a really loving, healthy relationship with yourself, body and mind and spirit and hobby. I love to go running. I haven't run for 3 weeks because I've been too busy. So it's like, then that isn't the best. The best isn't the most. The best is quality, as well as, you know, what you can achieve. So I think that's definitely in it around productivity. The other thing about capitalism, or as you say, the kind of capitalist, productive, consumerist world that we live in, 100 years ago, we would look ridiculous the way we are now. In 100 years, we will look ridiculous. So there's something anachronistic, which, you know, out of place time-wise. There's something quite ludicrous about how serious we take this 5 decades worth of infrastructure. We have one life. Maybe you believe in reincarnation or going to heaven or whatever, but in this realization of life, we have one, maybe 80 years on average, if you're lucky, a little bit less, a little bit more. And the idea that in that 80 years, I'm going to subscribe to the very, very strict rules, not boundaries, rules of a system that 100 years ago meant nothing, and in 100 years time will mean nothing. That is ludicrous. I can't know that and take it seriously. Can't.
Yeah.
So with the seagulls, that's why we've not bothered. I don't care about how it works now.
Yeah.
The human soul, laughter was important 100 years ago. Laughter will be important in 100 years' time. Love,
Yeah.
happiness, community, genuine, honest passion was important 100 years ago. It will still be important in 100 years' time. Nature, good diet, healthy body.
Yeah.
Same then. Love, romantic relationships. 100 years ago, same. 100 years' time, same. So those things are timeless. Anything that is finite to now and feels a little bit uncomfortable or disingenuous, there's no way I'm letting it have a ruling factor in my life. No way. I'm 41. Maybe I've got 40 years left. You're not having a minute of it. That sort of oppressive, demanding regime that I never signed up for, not having a minute of my time. No way. When I could see my mum and have dinner, or see my mates and play some music, or see 150 kids in a camp in Afghanistan and share laughter. That stuff's real. That's forever.
Yeah.
The rest of it is just fallacy, and most of it's to profit someone you'll never meet, to profit a company you have no stakes in.
Right.
Crazy.
I love the best isn't the most. That's profound.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Buddhism, because I was going to ask you how play might be a form of spirituality, because, like, I focus a lot here on this podcast about embodiment and joyfulness versus happiness, like just feeling joyful. So how can play be spiritual, and how does it make you feel embodied? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. 'Cause again, like I said earlier, like play, in order for it to be proper play, real play, it's got to be heart and soul. It's got to be a bit like, a bit like faith. I haven't got a faith. I'm not really a religious person. I really enjoyed some of the messaging around kind of the Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism when I was younger. Most of us do. You go through that phase. But it's like what I really enjoyed about Buddhism, or especially like the laughing Buddha, is the way he looked. That's all. I don't know enough about it, never studied it, but I've got a Buddha that I found in my treasure box. Yesterday, I went to my mum's loft and I found a box that I'd written treasure. And I'm like, wow, what's that? Stuff. And one of them is a big fat Buddha with a big fat smile, and I'd put a set of beads on him. And I thought that was playful. And when asked, are you a god or are you a man? The Buddha said, I'm awake. And I think that's a playful answer. So it's that same idea of, and Jesus. I don't know much about other faiths. Obviously, I grew up in a Christian family, I suppose, or kind of. So you look at Jesus. Look at the way he washed his disciples' feet. So that's already rules out the window. Playing with the idea of status, playing with the idea. He speaks on a mountain and says to people, "Love your neighbor." The 10 Commandments, they weren't save your money, do your tax return, pay your bills. The 10 Commandments were love thy neighbor. Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Like they're kind of human, playful statements. So I think, like, for me, play is a faith. Play and more joy, I suppose. I absolutely adore my work. I don't like all the admin that I have to do now. It's big. But when I'm in a session and I look a kid in the eye, especially recently, we've done a lot of work around disability, and they say, I can't go on the tight while I'm in a wheelchair. And I said, well, you can. It'll just take more of us to lift you up. And so we lift wheelchairs and roll them across the tight wire. Are they walking the tight wire? No. Are they playing the tight wire? You better believe it. And they have the same pride. So it's even playing with the idea on that deeper levels. My body is not my limit. My body is not the rules. My body is the vehicle to joy, or my vehicle to life, let's say. And as much as possible, if I have an influence over whether that's joy or pain, pain is unavoidable, loss is unavoidable. But gain and pleasure, we ignore a lot of the time because we'd rather focus on the bits that aren't good. So even just playing with that, I think it's a holistic experience. When you're really playing, you forget yourself. I see it, like I'm doing festivals, and I have parents who come, well-to-do. If you can afford a festival ticket, you've got to be doing all right. And they turn up and they think, I'm a parent, I'm an English parent, I'm a bit proper. by the end, they join in. They're leaping about. They're putting on costumes. They just
Mhm.
forget not to be joyful.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. We feel like we have to be sensible, or you have to grow up, or you have to be a certain way. Like I'm ludicrous in many moments of my work in life. Like
Mhm.
this weekend, I have a new T-shirt that says "I'm a hoolicorn" and it's pink, and I hula hoop in it, and the kids have to try and beat me. That's my job. That's my
I love
absolute
that.
job. Couldn't do it on a faith. So
Yeah.
I think it is a faith thing, but I think in the way that faith, from what I understand of faith and what I've seen of, faithful or religious components, it's absolute pure humanity. When
Yeah.
you kneel on the floor and praise Allah, or you go and you sing a psalm on a Sunday in a Christian church, or whatever it is that you do, or meditate as a Buddhist, you're basically trying to reach a position of as close to pure human and
Mhm.
life as you can, and that's exactly
Mhm.
what makes play good.
Yeah,
Not
I mean,
being
I
fat
think
or tall or small-eyed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a spirituality, that is a faith. It has, what you practice, because, you do it's intentional. You're putting play into your own life, into the lives of others, and they're losing themselves. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look, almost every faith has song involved. I find that
Yeah.
interesting. Almost
Yeah.
every faith has lots of people stand together in a holy place singing.
Yeah.
Cool. So music is religion. Music is
Yeah.
faith. There's often movements. There's often dances. You go into Islam and you've reached the Sufis. The Sufi mystics they express their absolute passion and joy and devotion to God through song. And there's
Mhm.
some amazing, you listen to them and it sounds like God singing, like,
Yeah.
wow. But communal song is important to something as supposedly formal as faith. Like that's what we do, and we laugh together.
Mhm.
It's the song of laughter. It's the most human expression of happiness. And if you do it in a big group, you feed the other until we're all, you've got a friend who laughs a lot. When you're with them, you laugh more.
Yeah,
That's the influence
absolutely.
of the laughter god.
Yeah. So in your TED Talk, you talk about there are some days that the either the weather's so bad or the violence was so bad that you just get in a circle, and instead of, maybe playing games like you normally would, they find their voices and you shout
Mm.
together or you kind of howl together. And I think that's what kind of that spiritual singing can be about, when you're just together and you're finding your voice, and then you're finding your voice with other people. So I think that's kind of like the primal feeling of just making noise with others is what that is, what singing is.
Yeah, it kind of taps into that higher force. I mean, even if you look at things like, in England, we have extremely passionate supporters of football. And when they go to a football match, I'm sure you've heard of football, the English football
Yeah.
hooligans, but outside of the hooligans, there is an extreme passion around football, or soccer as it is in the States.
Yeah.
And they go and they sing non-stop their town's chants.
Yeah.
We are Bedford Town. Oh, and it's like 10,000 people. I don't know how big these stadiums are. They're massive. All singing together. Like, yeah, I'm sure they love the game, but the experience of howling at the game, it,
Mhm.
it, it is a higher being, a higher force. It's the idea of connection, or the idea of community, which
Mhm.
we've lost, so rapidly in the last, since the Industrial Revolution, really, when you had landowners and factory owners and workers. Suddenly we weren't one community. So you had the worker community and the aristocrat community, and the landowner community. And especially in England, we
Yeah.
have a very still very existent feudal system where it's the owners and the workers. But actually when you go beyond that, like comedy, that's why I love comedy so much, and I love clowning so much, because clowning, it should be able to be done wordless. It should be able to be done classless. The
Mhm.
clown is below everybody. It has no status. The clown is, it can laugh at everybody because he or she or they put themselves below everybody. And that's
Mhm.
wonderful. It's liberating. But when everyone laughs at a clown falling over, don't matter who you are, what you are, since the beginning of time, someone falling over can be flipping hilarious. So, like, it's the higher being. It's an eternal truth,
Yeah.
and we all share it. Who
Right.
you are, whatever eyes you got, the body you got. It's
Right.
funny. I love
Yeah.
that. Completely unifying.
Yeah. And we all have bodies and we're all awkward, and yeah, I think that's such embodiment, like you're almost like feeling empathetic when you're laughing at something like that. You're like, "Oh my gosh, that is That's ridiculous because our bodies are ridiculous, but we all have them. So that's a
Yeah, and
fun.
that's what clowns do. So when I do clown training, like I mean, there's many different types of clowning, and I'm not versed in many, but the one I learned is that we do connection clowning is what I'm calling it now. So it's like basically we take you and exaggerate the bits of you that are what you normally hide. You exaggerate it. So I am a non-stop talker. You can already see in the podcast, you know, when you met me, I cannot shut up for 5 seconds. I get excited and start talking before the other person's finished. I can't help myself. So my clown is an absolute chatterbox, like non-stop. I take the thing I'm embarrassed about or the thing that I feel sensitive about, and I display it first and foremost in the biggest possible way. And by doing that, even if that other person's flaw or weakness isn't the same as mine, it might be that you think you got a big butt or that you sweat too much, or I don't know what it is. But by sticking my butt out and talking non-stop and being a rabbiter, I then display that whatever your flaw or fault is, it's all right. Because ain't none of us perfect. We're not carved out of porcelain. And if we were, what a boring person you'd be. You're beautiful and wonderful and God's own, passionate child because of your flaws, because your eyes are too big or because you stutter every time you say the word balloon or whatever it is. And I think that's what the clown does. It liberates the need to be perfect. And it encourages the celebration of our imperfections, which is exactly what makes us beautiful. If you think about your partner, the thing you love about him or her is not that his eyes are perfect. It's probably because he's got a funny habit that he always yawns after he has a biscuit. I don't know what it is. Those little tiny things, like they're the things. Like I love her to bits, but when she does that, it melts my heart. She's so cute, or she's so. I think it's glorious. It's the imperfections that are the things we love you for, not the bits you get perfect.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, I just want to know a little bit more about what is going on with the Flying Seagull Project.
Since when was it? It was a long time ago now. So we carried on in Greece. We then launched another branch in Norway. So we now have Flying Seagulls Norway, Flying Seagull Project, which is the UK branch.
Wow.
We also launched in the Netherlands. So beginning of COVID, a bunch of our team were Dutch and they were in Holland and saying, what should we do? And I was like, well, let's just do whatever we can. So we built we invented something called the Flying Showmobile. So the stage is the side of a van. So it's a van, like a big van, and the side is now an aluminium stage. And when you can wind it down, and inside is this beautiful ornate red velvet theatre. And where you stand in the middle of it, you are never, if you want to be, it's 2 meters from where I stand to the stage, which was the safety distance during COVID. So it means we could run, and I cut a hatch in the roof. So when you pull up, you climb through a secret hatch into the back, wind it down with the legs already in, do the show, wind it up and leave, and you've never got out the van, which meant that we were able to operate an awful lot through COVID because I could go to kids' homes or I could go to shelters and they could watch me from a safe distance.
Yeah.
So we've got one called the Flying Showmobile and one called the Wonder Wagon, and they now tour refugee camps and kid shelters. We've got 3 branches. It means we've got triple the amount of stuff happening. We also launched in England over lockdown, and I think I'd underestimated just how decimated the social fabric of England and the United Kingdom has become in the last kind of 5-10 years. Austerity hit hard, massive cuts to youth services. So you've got huge surges in communities where there's just nothing positive for the kids to do. And you roll on a decade and you've got disenfranchised youth with nowhere to express themselves and the temptation of, crime or of non-healthy expressions of their energy, let's call it. Yeah. So we started doing it just because in England and couldn't go anywhere else. And then when the world did open back up again, we thought, well, shall we try and do both? So now we roll out all our international projects, and we've got between 5 and 30 sessions happening every week in the UK as well, visiting refugee shelter hotels, visiting neighborhoods where, centralized cuts to the services have left the communities high and dry and they've got nothing for the kids to feel good about. And we also work in prisons, doing prison connections. So when families visit their parents in prison, it's an extremely stressful situation for both and has the opposite effect of they feel more alienated. So we start running family connections in prisons. When they visit, we get everyone feeling good, and it gives the inmates something to want to come out for and stay
Yeah.
out for, which is a
Yeah.
fact. That's great. We've been doing
Wow.
a load of stuff. We still work with Great Ormond Street, so we visit kids who are poorly in hospital. Not as often. There's another group that do a great job doing that, the Theodore
Hmm.
Trust, but we do a few sessions there. Um, we do free of charge festivals all summer. So we've always raised our money from festivals, but now we do what we call Get Up and Giggle Family Fun Fests. So we just go into an impoverished or pushed out or alienated community, build the tent in the middle of the public green and do 2 days of festival shows. We get
Mm.
permission from the council, but we don't tell anyone what we're doing. And we just do like, well, if you can't afford a ticket to go to Glastonbury, we'll bring Glastonbury to you. No
Mm.
problem. You'll still have the same fun as everybody else. And that felt really important after lockdown, that
Yeah.
everybody should have a return, an exit route from that isolation back into community.
Yeah.
The Ukraine war means that an awful lot of Ukrainian families obviously have fled. I personally don't care about nationality. I care about the experience of everybody involved. So
Yeah.
I know it's an unpopular thing to say, but for any community, whether it's Russian, Ukrainian, Afghani, anything else, if families are suffering who've got nothing to do with the big picture, we'll try and support them. So we started a project in Poland. We're entering into the second year now, and it's children who were already living in orphanages in Ukraine who were also evacuated to Poland because of the war. I'm like, that's a double whammy. You're already growing
Wow.
up with abandonment. Now you're displaced. So the Seagulls go, and we've met, I think, 3,500 kids. We're on our third time now this autumn, and we go to where they're staying and we spend a week with them and do puppets and craft and dance and circus and magic shows and all the fun
Hmm.
stuff. Strength. We've managed to convince an awful lot of people that we've known for a long time that play is not, it's not a luxury to be added on for some. It is a right to be insisted on for everybody. And we're
Hmm.
getting through now,
Mm.
big organizations, UNICEF, UNHCR, Save the Children, and names that are known around the world are now recognizing what we contribute.
Hmm.
I'm actually looking in the next year or so to move towards offering play consultancy. So I'll be doing real play training. You've
Hmm.
read the books, you've got the equipment, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And how you walk into a room makes a difference about how the kids join in. So let's start with who you are. Are
Yeah.
you brilliant? You
Yeah.
don't think so? Well, let's make sure you know you are before you go and tell them they're brilliant, or they won't believe you.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's huge, really.
Wow. So
Huge
much.
progress, huge thing. Yeah.
That is incredible. So,
And my hair's gone and it's turned grey because of all of it. So I'm a little bit more like a wild composer now. Bit by bit, it's just going to come out the sides and the back like Einstein.
So listeners can find out about you or if they wanted to contact you through the website. That's the best way to learn about the organization. Is that right? Or is social media better now?
Yeah, I mean, both really. The website's got an awful lot of kind of base information. You can come and find out who we are, what we do. But then, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook are probably they're kind of more day-to-day updated. So
Yeah.
yeah, either or even drop me a message anytime and say what you're up to, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's non-stop, but just after your laughter. And I've got a new catchphrase which I haven't told you yet, but
Oh,
we've got a new line of catchphrase called "For fun's sake." So now we say, "For fun's sake, play. For fun's sake, get on with each other. For fun's sake, have a laugh."
I love
So
that.
obviously it's a play on the but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. For fun's sake.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Ash. I guess it's evening for you now.
It
Good
is.
night.
We're just about to have a little bit. The sun is out for the first time all summer.
Oh, wow.
So, well, thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to see your name out of the blue after so many years and to be invited. It's a big compliment. So, yeah, appreciate you
Oh,
remembering
of course.
me and wanting me on your show.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you learned some new things about playfulness in children's lives and adults' lives, and a little bit more about the Flying Seagull Project. As I mentioned, Ash has a beautiful TED Talk, and if you want to check that out, and he has some video of the camps and the team engaging with kids. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. You can find me at Book of Lifeyness on Instagram. Have a beautiful day and a relaxing evening.